Oops, there we go. Good and tight.
Thanks.
My screen's up, right? For the notes?
Yep.
Oh. All right, well, we give folks another minute. Any other agenda items? Looks like we got a few topics, maybe a couple discussion topics to talk through. Mark, are you back in a Google office?
I am
Oh, wow.
full time.
Crazy. You don't have to like sign up to be in there full time?
No, starting last month, or something like that. And it's just at least in New York,
Yeah.
it's optional to return.
Oh,
Anyone
very
can.
cool.
You have to be vaccinated. That's it.
Yeah. I haven't gotten my stuff yet from the office. I'm a little scared. What was left over. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Do we have Dev or Peter on the call? I don't see the attendee list.
Hello. Yeah.
Yeah, we do.
You got me. How you doing? Hey.
Do you want to take over? Are you going to screen share? Do you want me to open something, Dev? Or are you just
Sure. Actually, there's nothing to screen share today. Just a quick chat. Just a quick hello. Yeah, I can't see all of the attendees, so I'm going to assume that possibly some of you don't know who we are. So just super quick recap. We have been working with Ghost team primarily, and some of the projects out of the OpenSSF. Certificate transparency. We've been working on SigStore, working on scorecards, and we've done a bit of work on SLSA as well. What we're doing here at the moment is the whole need that we have in general is to grow the adoption of these tools, of the open source security tools, in particular SLSA at the moment we're looking at. What we're going to be doing is making some updates to. Oh, thank you, Mark. Making some updates to the SLSA.dev site to make it like super engaging, credible, really clear about why people would bother to use this and what they need to do next. So we've made some advances on this in the past, and we're kind of giving it more like a content and visual overhaul. We're in the early stages. We've got a good few weeks left of this project. So what we're looking for is other people to feedback on some of the stuff that we're doing so far. So we want to bring people along and make sure that we're getting like the collective brain. So I will be sharing something after this meeting, which is just a little lay of the land where we are today, and a little clickable prototype that is like a proposal for a slight reshuffle of how the site currently looks. So we're sharing that afterwards. The ask from yourselves is anybody that wants to see this and to provide feedback on it. The feedback we're looking for this time will probably be about 20 minutes or something, 20 minutes of your time. Anybody that does want to do that is not already on the SLSA if discuss mailing group, please let us know, and we can get you on the mailing group. So SLSA-if-discuss. And we're going to post it on there afterwards. So anybody is welcome to jump in and provide feedback. And there'll be instructions on how to do so. And we've got links to where you need to go and everything. So yeah, all are welcome. Thanks. That's all from me.
Do you want to maybe do a brief demo of it if we have time at the end of the meeting?
Oh, I could. I mean, it's very, yeah, I can show you through it. Yeah, sure. Let's do it at the end of the meeting. Yeah.
If we have time, but that would,
Cool.
I think
Sounds
that'd be
good.
helpful. If you want collective brain, I mean, that's one way to get it.
Sure thing. Yeah. Cool. All right. I'll prepare that.
Oops, I'm muted. Yeah, we probably have time. And I have the next couple of items on here. Anyone else have any questions for Deb before I jump into? No. Cool. All right, the next thing that we have is Abhishek was so kind to create an issue with a bunch of open source attacks. And I know I've seen a few of these lists. I think CNCF has one. I'm not sure if it's updated. I know Santiago from Intoto had a list too. And Minds will create another list just to get more people trying to keep this updated. I think it'd be awesome if this actually lands on the website somewhere in a way that we can easily keep refreshed. So I'm not sure, Deb, if that's something in the design plan or something maybe we can talk about later in the meeting when we see your demo. And then I thought the purpose of this was, again, just to sort of keep ourselves honest in how SLSA is helping. So, see attacks in the wild, like this is where SLSA maybe could help or could have prevented this attack, or maybe is out of scope or should be considered. So, and yeah, feel free to add more links, and maybe I need to cross-check with some of those other lists that are existing. Michael, do you know if the CNCF one is kept updated? Or, I mean, there's no reason to duplicate this stuff, but just I haven't seen any, like some end at 2019.
So yeah, I mean, there are there's a couple of GitHub issues to sort of update some of this, and I will say it's kind of a little all over the place between supply chain attacks versus just like, let's say, an open source compromise versus some of these other things. And I believe there's some discussion going on in the security tag group to sort of either consolidate or figure out a better way of sort of displaying some of that.
Okay. Yeah, maybe if we can keep in the loop with that stuff and maybe collaborate on some of it, not create 8,000 lists that are the same thing. Yeah, any other thoughts on these lists or good ways to keep it up? Go ahead.
Kim?
Yeah.
Oops. Who's first?
I was just going to say, I think one of the problems with the CNCF list is like the friction to like, it's not super hard to create a PR, but it's could be easier effectively. So if we had like a more structured, I'm almost imagining like rows in a spreadsheet that translate to a table on the site or something would be a bit easier to do the bookkeeping.
Yeah. Even a Google form maybe that converts, that goes into a sheet, but if that's even easier than maintaining a sheet maybe or something.
Yeah, Kim, you're not trying to make a complete list, right? You're just trying to get a sample and say either SLSA helps or it's out of scope or it doesn't help or it could help. It doesn't yet today, and we need to change, maybe think about changing SLSA to help also. That's all you're trying to do, right? You're not trying to make a complete list.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the more complete that relates to supply chain security attacks, the better. But again, just to like catch what's happening in the wild and, make ourselves.
I mean, if you want a complete list, the folks that I know of who've tried their hardest at that would be the Backstabbers Knife Collection folks.
Yeah.
And they did that survey and they've got their data public. I think at least their list is on GitHub. But I frankly, I'm trying to do that analysis for every single one kind of scares me. I mean, that's an academic, serious academic project with a lot of work. If we could just have a subset to say we picked a subset and we're trying to show you that it helps. I mean, if that's all you do, you don't need a complete set.
Yeah. No, I think just more data is better. It doesn't have to be complete.
Your Google is showing more data is better.
Of course. Well, I think it would help, down the road prioritize too, if there's, attacks that we keep seeing that are related to SLSA and we want to spend more time on XYZ, could be helpful.
Yeah.
Michael, I see your hand up. Can I ask David one more question? Speaking of backstabbers, now, do you know them, David? Would they be interested in coming and presenting and talking about their work?
I don't know them well. I don't know them well, but I do know them. I have interacted with them. Let me see. I've never heard a no from, hey, academic, could you please talk about your academic work? I think if they said no, it would be the first in the history of mankind. Yeah. So I think they would love, I'm sure that they would love to talk about their work. Now, interestingly enough, I do know that they're currently working on trying to do a better taxonomy of different kinds of attacks. They're in the process of writing a paper. I don't know how much they're prepared to talk about that, but that might be helpful, because if they've got a taxonomy, they have looked at a whole lot of data, and if they group into the categories, instead of trying to map the individual ones, you might be able to map their categories.
Yeah.
And basically build on their work instead of redoing it.
Yep. Yeah, either this working group or the now newly renamed supply chain integrity group, I think would be great places to have them come chat if they're up for it.
Again, academics being asked to speak at two groups. I just have a hard time seeing the word no emerging. So yeah, I think they'd love to do it. And I think in both cases, it'd be relevant because they have done a lot of that work of trying to look at large data sets and come up with groupings and categories and such.
Cool. All right, Michael, your hand's been up for a while.
Oh yeah, so I think actually David answered a good deal of it. I think just to highlight a few things. So in some of the obviously other supply chain stuff at the CNCF and other groups, one of the things that's been coming up from a lot of new folks who are just sort of don't understand is they would very much love something like on a website, a list of example attacks and where, something like a SLSA would help, where, like in the sort of, was it A through H list of, where those supply chains can be attacked. And I think also like, what level or whatever. And I know some of that's in the ladder and some of those things are kind of coming up. But, I think the thing is, some of these that, are listed there, it's like, even if you can sort of list the, a couple of examples, and then more generally, also, I think one of the other things that we would also be, that a lot of folks would be interested in is also understanding where's, here's a list of attacks that SLSA itself doesn't necessarily cover, because remember, SLSA is focused more on integrity, not necessarily, anyway.
Yeah, that's good advice. Mark had a page. I don't know if it's live yet about more details in the.
I just linked it in the chat.
Okay. Oh, where the heck's the chat? There it is.
It's salsa.dev/threats.
Yeah.
Yeah, right now it's not like highlighted as like one of the top level links, I think, because, well, I wasn't confident enough to put it there because it kind of goes into a lot of detail and there's like a lot of like to-dos there. But we can see, if this is useful, we could maybe annotate this with real world examples, and or clean it up and make it, raise the visibility of it.
Cool. Yeah, this is great. I didn't realize you're a front-end programmer too, Mark.
No JavaScript. Evidently, that's a feature of HTML. One of these.
Oh, really? There's no JavaScript in here?
Nope.
Wow, amazing. All right, cool. So we'll see if, yeah, we can get some other folks coming to talk to us on the work that they're doing, just collecting attacks, and maybe see if we can get some of this into the new site design and help some newcomers out to show all the good work everyone's doing. All right, any other thoughts, questions on that? No. And then the budget items, I mentioned this last time, and David might have a more updated info than I do, but again, OpenSSF has a number of Premier memberships now that are all paying Premier membership dues, and looking for calls to use that money effectively, basically. And so these were some of the ideas that maybe we chatted about a few times that I came up with. Again, just feel free to toss other things in there. I mentioned help with the SLSA website. I'm not sure what the scope is of the refresh, but more to do there, I think, if possible. Everyone's been asking about the OpenSSF Goose wearing a salsa dress. So maybe some salsa swag. And then another thing is a training series was another idea that I had. So we did like these fun kind of Hollywood style videos just to drive a little bit of awareness of salsa at a high level. But I've seen other projects just go into more detail with a proper training series. Certification program was another thing we talked about early on. Like, how are we gonna claim that people or projects are reaching different salsa levels? So toss that one in there. And then again, funding for just projects to help out projects to get more secure. Maybe targeting the higher salsa levels was the last idea. Any others people want to throw out or comments on those?
This is a pretty good list, actually. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Michael.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think one other thing which I think is related to that last point is also around funding projects at the sort of that are within the purview of what you would imagine salsa, like, whether it's the source code repository, the CI system, artifact repository, getting those to more to work with salsa attestations and those sorts of things. I think that's another.
Yeah.
I think certification program might be premature at this point, just because like we're not, we're still iterating on salsa, and I like in a 0.x release, right? So I feel like the other items might be more valuable.
Yeah. Good call.
Yeah, as far as trainings, and I think don't eliminate it. Just say
no. I'm just moving it lower.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth talking about. I think Mark has a great point about it may be premature. As far as training series goes, I mean, there's a whole bunch of the LF actually has a whole training department that might be able to be helpful.
Yeah.
I work with them for the edX course from OpenSSF on just fundamentals. So I mean, you don't have to use that, but we have some resources that might be useful in that area. Probably for both the training and the certificate, if those are perfectly reasonable things to fund, but I think that we would have to delve in a little bit about exactly what do you want, like a training course. I mean, are we talking a 10-minute quick intro to the details? Are you talking about let's really delve in and talk about various ways to implement it? I mean, both are plausible answers, but we would have to make that decision before any kind of budget could be possibly made.
Yeah. And it might be similar with the certification program a little bit early, because I think the implementation, like someone walking through different ecosystems and stuff, how one might achieve the higher salsa levels, like the reference architecture type work that's going on right now would be awesome.
If I can jump further on the training, because I've had to go down this road, the LF education folks had an interesting point. Video is fun, it's engaging. I've seen some interesting salsa video, but one challenge with the videos is that editing them is a lot of work and can be costly. Which is why, for example, the fundamentals course is basic. It's text and pictures, because once you started trying to get into the details, oh wait a minute, we may have to edit that. Well, editing video 6 months later is not so easy.
Yeah.
Editing text is. So it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do video, but that becomes part of that conversation. So like a general awareness, probably video is great.
Yep.
As soon as you start talking about the technical details, if they're possibly going to be changing, Mark, I would say that the chance of rain 100%. So, we might want to have more text focused on the tutorial, on any tutorial, at least until we're sure that's totally locked down for a long period of time.
Yeah. Yeah, they gave me like one take at the salsa video. I was like, wait a minute, can I go splice, refresh? Anyway.
I enjoyed the salsa video, if it helps.
Oh, there's a new episode. It's,
my goodness.
Yeah, it's private right now. We're trying to figure out how we're gonna take it to the public. Maybe I'll add a link here later in the Slack first glimpse. Cool. Okay. And then David, just quickly, do you know if we should write these up? Like, I'm just sort of tracking the list here and waiting to see more like calls to actually write up.
Here's the problem. I think you're in one sense you can always make requests, but but I think that it would be wise to try to get something in within the next. They want to lock down a first budget in 3 weeks, so I would try to send in something within this week if you can. And you don't have to have everything. So hey, we're not sure what to do about certification. Fine. But if you want swag and maybe a small training series, put in a request for that, and maybe like for 1 or 2 projects to work on salsa. And I could easily see that, by the way, being merged into the alpha omega part, for example. If it's only a couple projects, try it on alpha, a couple of the alpha projects.
Sure.
And so that might get merged in there, but I can easily see separate funding for at least kind of a 1 level down, not just an awareness, but a knowledge kind of training.
Cool. Okay.
And for the swag. And I do promise that if we have swag, if it's not too expensive, I will buy her and let her join the collection here.
Or the cheaper route, just get the dress.
Yeah, I don't know. Can you put a dress on? Well, all right, we're going off field.
All right, cool. I will try to write some stuff down this week. If anyone else wants to help or jump in or has comments, just feel free to ping me. And with that, Matt, you have the next item on the list.
Yeah, okay. I have some quick slides to figure out how to present.
Good luck.
Yeah. Hey, okay. Hello. There we go. God, why does it do that? Why does it share microphone by default? All right.
Don't see it.
Oh, really? Ugh. Your screen sharing is paused. That work? Yeah. No?
I now see a different black screen.
Oh boy.
Hey!
There we go.
Oh boy. Okay. So I presented at Packaging Con just a bit about some of the work I've been doing with Salsa and trying to integrate it or come up with some strategies to integrate it into existing packaging ecosystems, preferably in a kind of over the top fashion. So trying to change as little existing infrastructure as possible, and just figuring out ways to do it over the top, so to speak. So the first rough thing was to monitor CI, like GitHub Actions, to for repo whatever A, and record the provenance as package X. So I have a little in my demo, a little GitHub repo that has a policy for a given package that says, hey, look at this repo, look for, say, this workflow, and generate provenance off of that. And it kind of reuses a lot of the same GitHub Actions machinery that we published in the first demo. I don't know how much I should go into detail, but I think this is Salsa L3, which is great. If we can get this working for people, for GitHub Actions, we need the actual artifact or the hash, and for that we need the artifact. So people need to be using that artifacts API, and we need to be able to trust it. But aside from that, the build is code, and it's tied to a repo. And that's great. Tons of existing compatibility. More and more people using that sort of CI, but you do get lock-in. Oh, actually, I have prettier pictures. Slightly prettier
pictures. Forged lock. Wait a minute. When you say lock-in, are we talking about forged lock-in, or are we lock-in of repo? Which lock-ins are we talking about?
Lock into whatever is supported for, say, Salsa provenance publication. So maybe GitHub Actions, or only a few which satisfy all our constraints. Yeah. So for the Python packaging sort of demo that I'll touch on a bit later, this is what it looks like. So you have the little policy scroll at the top left, and just some endpoint querying GitHub Actions for the results that were ultimately published to PyPy, and then it just stores the provenance. The next one, which is the one I want to touch on the most, is the sort of the rebuilder strategy. So kind of keying off of reproducible builds, taking provenance or generating provenance off of the produced package. So taking a package and trying to maybe reverse engineer how it might have been built, which for especially source archives is feasible, I would say, or there might not be a tremendous diversity in different ways to build certain types of packages or environments. And I think this is L2. So it's a bit weird because it's not necessarily defined by the by the project, and it could potentially be a different build process. But we are producing effectively the same artifact, and so you could argue that if I don't know, some central system like salsa.dev is producing these bits of provenance, that is as long as you trust salsa.dev, you could trust this at this Salsa level. It would be retroactive, which is great. So we could address entire back catalogs of packages without sort of waiting for the slow trickle of people migrating to a different workflow, right? And the sort of existing reproducible builds kind of process in Debian has some pretty actionable output. So you can a package maintainer could self-service figure out how to address non-deterministic builds.
Just a quick note, maybe everybody already knows this, but I mean, some packages will rebuild and some packages won't, or at least won't rebuild deterministically. So we did find a fair number do rebuild deterministically when that was done in the security threats working group. But I mean, it's not, or deterministic if you ignore date times, but a lot, enough do that's worth trying, but not everything does.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just get into that now. I'll just I tried this out basically with the top 100 Python packages to see sort of what the feasibility is. So I hope a lot of people are already familiar with PyPy, but basically same thing with most open source limited engineering resources, huge ecosystem. There are a couple, notably largely textual release artifact formats. So we're dealing with like zipped structured metadata, but not sort of compiled binaries, at least for what I was trying to address, which is just the platform independent binary artifacts. So not native code, so numpys and scipys of the world, but what turns out to be a pretty big majority of the consumed resources. So something like 70+% of the total downloads from PyPy are these types of artifacts. And I didn't use any PRs to change upstream. So basically, as world as is, try to see what we can do. Yeah, so monitoring CI and rebuilding. Yeah, Python's a bit of a mess in terms of this, but I don't know. Hopefully this can make it better, but it's a bit janky. So I managed to get like 50 of the 100, so like half going, and this was with just a bit of engineering for the talk. Basically, I think we could get a lot higher with a bit more effort, but that represents, and I did a bit of retroactive rebuilding and managed to get like a quarter of all PyPy downloads covered by this. Both the CI monitoring form, like a deployment, as well as the rebuilding. Yeah, so most of them, the vast majority of them, were rebuilt successfully, or the ones that I could. A few I just need a little more work to support, and some of them have legitimate divergences from their declared source, which is potentially security relevant, but at the very least just hygiene relevant. And some of them were missing repo altogether. So you don't even need to declare an upstream repo, but I'm sure they exist. And CI monitoring, I was only targeting a very small segment of, like, I was only targeting GitHub Actions builds that looked a certain way. So understandably, they didn't do terrifically, but it's something. I have a demo. I'm fine skipping it. There's not much fanciness about it, but yeah. So the general architecture, I'll go back to rebuilding. Looks something like this. So taking a potentially unknown build process, consuming the artifact as well as the source, trying to figure out what tag it was built from, which is usually pretty easy. People seem to be pretty good about creating tags or releases in GitHub. Yeah, and then having a few configuration knobs for rebuilding that we can inject into that process, doing the build, and then uploading the result to a provenance store. Yeah, so at least for Python, and I looked a bit into Ruby, and it seemed like I'm not sure what reproducibility stats I could get there, but I think the construct holds for that ecosystem as well.
Quick, we have a confusion about the numbers that you're showing. Is it 25% reproduced or 47% reproduced out of these top 100?
Yeah, sorry, that's a bit confusing. 50% at head. So at the
okay.
Most recent release, 50% were able to be either reproduced or I could look at CI and get enough information to generate provenance from that for L3.
That part I don't understand. What do you mean you were able to look at it?
So like some CI metadata was available to have, you know, the hashes of the outputs as well as the details of the build, enough to generate that L3 provenance from this diagram.
Okay, so 50% were able to be reproduced, if I can summarize it. Is that
so
okay?
The vast majority were rebuilt. You saw like that 47 of 100, and there's actually 5, but for all intents and purposes, let's say 3 were able to get the metadata necessary from the GitHub Actions workflows. The 25% of all downloads was taking, like, not just the top 100, but like every artifact, I think in the top 10,000 or something, the download stats for the past like week, and 25% of those. So there's a lot of like tons of versions of like Photo or any of the popular Python packages are in there. So they get counted more than once, but basically the total download skews pretty highly towards the top 100 PyPy packages. And that's why that 25% is an approximation of sort of the total outflow traffic from PyPy, which is encouraging.
Yeah, and the other working group did this with, I believe they were focusing more on JavaScript, but I don't remember the numbers offhand. But again, they were actually pretty promising in terms of being able to reproduce. Again, at the head, they weren't trying to reproduce all historical versions. Nobody cares anyway.
Well, I don't know. There's still a pretty sizable, proportion of like versions or packages that haven't necessarily had a release cut recently that have serious diversity going back like 6 months.
Yeah, okay. I take it back. You're right. I was thinking more in terms of those long running projects, where version 1 was 20 years ago, and maybe maybe we're less worried about the 20-year-old version. But yeah, you're right. It's and indeed there's a lot of version skew, particularly within the JavaScript community of using very old versions. So but still, this is I think this is promising. They weren't doing anything and you still managed to reproduce, and I get the impression that you think you could get even more without how much harder do you think it would be?
So a lot of the historical ones kind of end up failing just because I didn't have enough heuristics to detect the build tools they were using, which change. Like the metadata that it writes has changed quite a bit in the last, say, year. So even just, improving the historical rebuild quality, the like that 25% of all downloads can get bumped up. The coverage outside of the top 100 packages, I did not look at. The coverage within that was not in the 47 out of 100. Maybe half of it would be just an engineering thing on the like adding more smarts to the rebuilder, not doing anything upstream. The remainder, so maybe a quarter of those, either have native dependencies, so wouldn't be served by the current form of the rebuilder. I didn't look into the feasibility of reproducing the native builds, but the config space would be larger, but more compute might just be able to solve that. Just adding a few more like packages that are able to be downloaded. I was pretty conservative with what I let the packages install, but just opening that up a bit, I think would be interesting. It also gives the option to make the builds hermetic by default, which I think should is a good kind of pressure to have on an ecosystem like that. And from what I saw, could get like very good coverage still. So I think
for
all of those
meta builds for Python at least.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, that's well, at least for the top packages.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you're going to get the same answer with Rust, but okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So what comes out of this is I think we could do a lot of cool stuff having an exact like commit hash that shows the repository from which these things were built. You can do fun like diffs between versions to get the contributors, the exact diff between like upstream versions. Things that are lacking here are things like documentation are excluded from these sorts of binary builds generally. So those are generally distributed with the source archives, which is another can of worms, but those generally don't represent large proportions of the PyPy downloads. Like the default is binary if it exists. And looking at the whole ecosystem, I believe this is for the top 5,000 or 10,000 packages. 60 to 70% publish the platform independent wheels, so the pure Python wheels. So that's still a large addressable market for this sort of approach. Yeah.
Now, how did you handle zip? I mean, Python wheels have zip files with date timestamps in them. How are you handling that?
Yeah. Good question. Yeah, so that's definitely a fudge. My argument's that doesn't represent something either security sensitive nor interesting to people generally. So I believe strict determinism is, anyway, in the reproducible builds project, there's a tool to basically remove that metadata. I just wrote a little editor to copy over the configuration of the upstream package to the rebuilt package to make the diffs pretty mainly, but also just to kind of I don't know, remove that source of difference. Yeah, so the file mode, the creation time, and a few other bits of metadata can basically leak from the build file system into the resulting archive. Again, I don't think those are really security relevant, so those are zeroed out basically between the two. Those don't participate in the comparison.
I'm thinking this through. We might have to have a conversation about that, because if it's actually installed if a package is actually installed and you use those permission bits for the installation, having something world writable on some systems could be really bad. World writable files on Android can be not what you were looking for.
Yeah, that feels much more the responsibility of other sorts of analyzers. For this, reconstructing the source reference, I think is a far more important goal than getting sort of potentially the ability to have enough coverage over an ecosystem to be able to start to turn on potentially auditing even download for checking these sorts of provenance. Probably opt-in, potentially inline, but certainly 50+% is getting to the point where you can imagine it kind of being attractive to users of the ecosystem.
Right. And I can even imagine a tweak of date time stamps you don't care about. Generally, we don't care about permission bits, but if they're significantly more permissive, maybe we do care.
Well,
Mark?
I think we could also consider this like perfect is the enemy of good.
Right.
If we get to a point, like you could also classify as like, was it reproducible with these hacks versus was it like purely cleanly reproducible? And maybe you consider one kind of a stronger or a higher salsa level or something like that than the other. But I also feel like if that's our biggest problem is that someone could change the permissions, like we've solved a huge class of problems. And
yes, we have. Amen. I completely agree. Well, and indeed, I think this is important information that 50% and 25% without the projects doing anything. I think that's we've been having, and I'm sure we will continue to have arguments about how strongly should reproducible builds be part of SLSA somewhere. But if indeed we can get those kinds of numbers relatively quickly, that's a much stronger argument for, maybe this isn't that hard, especially if we looked at a couple of the ones where they weren't. Are these, I am assuming that this is not a, hey, we have to rewrite all the code. This is we got to we got to add some sorts in a couple places, and boom. It seems like we're closer than a lot of people were afraid we were.
I mean, this is also choosing an ecosystem where it's amenable to reproducible builds, right? Because Python, like a lot of the packages are relative. I don't know, Matt knows more than I do. I think the set of build tools is relatively small, and a lot of like pure Python packages do very simple builds. I think if we talked about something like C++, the picture would look way different.
Yeah. I just shared the screen of the reasons for not reproducing.
Oh, excellent. Can you walk us through real quick?
And zoom
so some
in
of them are
as well.
native.
Yeah, some are native, and you're not trying to rebuild natively, I'm guessing.
Not yet. I don't think it's necessarily out of the question, but it might require a little more hand-holding than I was doing, basically just script-based policy generation from just using a couple heuristics.
Now, do you do a single build for each one and then just see the results, or do you try multiple options?
Yeah, so this is one of the shortcuts that this approach takes. I basically look for branch or tag metadata that indicates it might be a release for a given version. And if I find one, I try to build it, and
No, that's not what I mean. That's not what I mean. Given a particular version, do you try to rebuild it in multiple different ways?
Yeah. So what I was saying there was for at least the source reference, I am just using a single, like yes or no. Like if it matches, I'll try to do everything I can to find the right configuration and then build it once.
Okay, you're only building it once. Right. That's the thing that the other group did, is that they actually just did multiple build. We're not sure which one would go. Let's try them all.
Right.
They got pretty decent numbers.
If you look to the graph, the 10% of them I just bailed out early because I didn't find the matching tag. So that's no tags at the lower left. That can just be, just throwing money at the problem would work there. Just like trying all of the ones around the release of the artifact would either yield, a match, and that could be built off of, or, it's not reproducible. So I think the specifics of the demo aside, there are a ton of different approaches that end up getting us closer to full coverage of the addressable artifacts.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Windows line endings. Oh my gosh! I mean, that's not that hard to deal with. That may be, okay. So that gives me, frankly, even hope for doing a lot of the rest of these.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, even the native might not be like all is lost. Yeah, Windows, just get a Windows environment. Missing repo, just get like upstream the Git repo you're already building from, and that you could find by just Googling. Put that metadata into the release so that PyPy knows about it. Yeah, setup.cfg, they're just like a few other types of builds people have been doing that just required a different like entry point that I didn't get to. So I'd say more than half of these probably have a good shot at being addressed.
Excellent.
That was very cool. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, it'd be awesome to see the full slides if you can share them. It sounds like maybe not.
Yeah, I don't think you're generally allowed to share slides outside of the context of the presentation.
Okay, but there might be a video to your presentation that you can share.
It's recorded. It should be posted in the next 2 weeks.
Cool. Any other comments, questions? I think most of them are answered in the chat. It looked like you picked the top 100 based on download count.
I'm just muted. Yeah.
Yeah.
Found it.
Cool. Thank you. And then last item, well, maybe second to last item on the list. Josh and Tom, you guys both did a talk at Supply Chain Security Con, and the recording is available. Anything else you want to say about your talk?
Neither is here.
Okay,
Tom is not
perfect.
here, and Josh had to leave early.
All right, well, go watch their talk. It was pretty good. I was there. The recording's up.
Are we going to go back to Dev for the demo since we have a little bit of time?
Yeah. Do we have enough time, Dev?
I think we gave at least a shot.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I won't do a demo. I'll explain. Let me get my screen shared and I'll explain what this thing is. So we're at the point in the kind of the design process of looking at salsa.dev where we are trying to get a content structure in place. So we're thinking about where it is now, where it needs to go, future-proofing it. So what we're looking for is feedback on a potential content structure. So what we've done in order to get that feedback is we've made a little clickable prototype. So this is not like a new design. It's not logos, colors, anything like that. What I'm going to send out to the discussion group is just a request for feedback on this. And there's instructions here to open the wireframe prototype and then leave feedback on a separate page. So the wireframe prototype will look like this. Hoping you can see my stuff right now. Oh, why is my thing not working? There we go. Right. So basically it will be gray boxing. It's a bunch of gray boxes with content in, but it organizes the purpose of Salsa. It establishes the problem. It establishes, top level concepts, and then it digs down into different areas. So people that are familiar with the salsa.dev at the moment will notice the diff. Basically, there'll be clear differences between like, oh well, that was on this page and now that's on this page. But what we're trying to do is conform things in such a way that they make a little bit more sense as a set of documentation, and then do some other stuff like add videos and images to the community page or whatever, particularly though driving people to understand the thing in the first place, centralizing all the documentation, and then how to get involved. So one of the things we're doing, for instance, the current thing that we're playing with is trying to work out how to centralize the documentation and make it so that it can be versioned easily in a centralized point, making sure that it can grow easily and making sure that we can add new pages to it easily without like blowing up the architecture of the website. So that's one of the main things we're trying to achieve. So basically you'll just see a load of gray boxing. It's all rough and ready. It's not very nice design or anything, but for people that are interested in like talking about where should stuff go on a website, we would appreciate the feedback. So then when you've had a play through this, then there's a little feedback document here and some instructions on how to feedback on each of these pages and sections. So it's really for people that want to dive into those details at this stage. And we're looking for about, like, I think probably going through it and making some notes will probably take you 20 minutes, 25 minutes. You know, obviously you could go ham and spend hours on it, but we don't suggest that. And anyone that wants to give feedback by sort of Monday, Tuesday next week would be really helpful.
So I have a quick question for you. At least one particular way I see someone using this site, because they're interested in SLSA, they have an idea that they've got a problem, would be, gee, I see that there's 4 levels. What are the criteria for level 1? Click. I see the basic. Here are the high level requirements. And then I see that one right there. I don't understand it, or I want to understand that better, or I want some tips on how to do that. And so maybe clicking on that and being able to see more details of not just the high level requirement, but the detail. What are ways you could achieve that? Is that kind of process for that particular kind of user going to be relatively straightforward?
Yes, that's exactly the sort of thing we're trying to do. So what we're trying to do is like attract and retain people that were probably a little bit unsure about it. And so, you know, you do that by like nibbling them. So you give them a little bit and then give them access to the extras. So that's exactly the tact we're planning to take this time around. Yeah.
Okay.
How broadly do you want feedback? Like, we could email the larger SLSA discussion group if we want broad feedback, or do you think that would be too wide of a blast?
Good question. I mean, sort of feeding back to this at this stage requires that little bit of context about like where we are in this process. I'm always for like any feedback can be valuable feedback, but what I don't want to do is completely confuse the wider community. So I would take your steer on that. If you think it's going to cause confusion, I don't think we should do it at this stage. If you think people, you know, just with a bit of written explanation that people would be open to it, then yeah, let's do it.
All right, so maybe I guess it sounds like folks who are already in this meeting and kind of invested, maybe that's a good enough group, but people who didn't, we'll just limit to the existing basically the steering committee members and anyone else who's interested.
Okay, and then there will be an opportunity, I think, like, you know, in a couple of weeks' time, we'll be in a place where we can actually share it really widely and get wide-ranging feedback, because it will actually hang together a bit more and make sense as a website. Cool, nice one.
One note on that. Thanks, Deb. On that group, I just noticed that it's not, anyone can't ask to join. So I think I created that when I was at Google. I don't have permissions to change it anymore. So it might be like an invite only setup right now, so people can't add themselves. So.
Okay, no problem. Can you think of another way, or you can Slack me afterwards just to another better way that I can catch this group that we have on this call today?
Yeah, if I recall correctly, I think you or maybe Mark have access to change the permissions on that group if you want to make it like people can ask to join.
I did
your call.
I just did that during this meeting, so it should be anyone on the web can ask to join. This also I have to discuss. And there's a link in the like one of the first bullets. Yeah, like that. Anyone should be able to join.
Awesome.
Great, thank you.
All right.
And to be clear, that's the group that we're using for all of this website redesign feedback. So if you're interested in being involved in that conversation, you could join that, and then you could get regular updates on that.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. Matt, super cool to see your work. There's some more comments in the meeting notes about that if you want to take a look. Or oh yeah, never mind, you're commenting in the chat. All right, cool. Everyone have a good day and see you in a few weeks.